welcome to another exciting episode of Riding Through the Unknown. I'm your host, Michael, and thank you for joining us on this adventure tonight. And I have a little announcement that I want to make before I introduce my awesome and amazing guest, and that is there is a birthday today of someone who has helped me so much with the show. He helped me get my microphone to work and has so much patience. So I want to wish a wonderful, happy 21st birthday to Ryan. And with that being said, I am now going to turn it over to my amazing guest who, if I was to try and read her bio, that would probably take up the entire show in itself. So I am going to hand it over to her to give a little bit about her background. So, with that being said, I give you the one, the only, amazing, super talented, amazing speaker, Geraldine Orozco.
Well, thank you so much for that warm welcome. It's such a joy to be here, Michael. Thank you. Yeah, so a little bit about me. I'm an epigenetic psychotherapist and a lifelong contactee. I've had contact since I was a child. I didn't know it was contact until I had a very conscious and very physical contact experience in 2013. And this completely changed my life. It activated my psychic abilities. And from there, I began to see the world, myself, the internal realms in a completely different way. And in 2017, I had several hypnotic regressions that allowed me to download information about the origins of the human race in terms of our genetic origins, and how we ourselves are a hybridized race. At that point, I sold my business. I went back to school actually to learn how to, what, hypnotherapy was all about, because I could not believe how I was able to access that information that I've never read before, never researched before. And it was something that, we've been studying and researching for since the beginning of time. So it was amazing to link those two together. And I began to learn about, our DNA, our holographic DNA, which is basically a database, a holographic database of memory, which we can all tap into. And that's essentially what I did. So, from there, I began to open support groups, international experiencer support groups, and deep dive into the research of epigenetic psychotherapy and how contact essentially passes down generations. So that's where I first started my work.
That's amazing. And one thing I will admit, and I have no shame in admitting this, is you mentioned your work as being an epigenetic psychotherapist. I have no idea what an epigenetic means. So, could you explain that for everyone?
Yeah, absolutely. Epigenetics is basically the study of how our everyday life habits are affecting our DNA, essentially. Not like the structure of your body or the form or the shape of your biology, but essentially epigenetically, which is kind of like the layer over your DNA that turns genes on and off. Depending on the environment that you're providing internally for your body. So, whatever you're eating, whatever you're thinking, feeling, your emotions, everything that you're experiencing in the waking and dream state are all affecting your epigenetic markers. So if you create an environment for illness in your body, let's say a life full of stress, toxic food, toxic environment, a lot of suffering and pain, you have the perfect environment for illnesses and other kinds of psychological limitations. The DNA also begins to kind of shrink and wrap up rather than express itself in its full expression. So epigenetic psychotherapy is basically looking at the connection between our psychology and our DNA. Are we providing an environment psychologically for our biology to be expressed in its highest potential? And the connection between that, which I bring, is essentially the connection of the soul, your highest expression, with this psychology and your physical biology. So I talk a lot about spiritual biology, and essentially how our spiritual aspect is actually the largest part of our life, and the biggest influence on our health is how we maintain spiritual connection.
So I'm curious, because being in with a metaphysical background, I've done a lot of studies and a lot of self healing work, and I feel like I've kind of rewritten the DNA to as I grow and learn. Is that kind of what you're talking about doing? And I've been doing it without realizing that's what I was doing.
Yeah, 100%. We can absolutely change, what we are expressing. So, psychologically, our memories, our emotions, our programming, and our belief systems, those are things that we hold inside of every cell of our body. And again, they will dictate the kind of genes that we're turning on and off. So, traumas that we've encountered as a child, especially from the womb until the age of 7, these are the formative years that really kind of create a foundation for our programming and belief systems. And that's not just in your everyday psychological interactions. This is spiritual as well. Why? Because these programs are inherited generations. We are literally, when we wake up, when we were born, on this planet, we kind of fall back asleep into a hypnosis. We kind of forget who we really are, and we take on all the inherited programs. We end up going in cyclical patterns, just simply repeating what we've been repeating for generations. So the kind of shadow work that you're doing in regards to deprogramming and kind of rewriting, your core programming, is essentially this shadow work. We are deprogramming all of these inherited belief systems, the construct of the matrix, at a genetic level, so that we can then rewrite and allow the core, the really pure essence, the soul expression, to kind of move through our physical vessel. And that actually helps us create longevity. We learn how to self heal ourselves from illnesses. We can tap into the Akashic records, basically expand and utilize our intuition and our higher faculties. And this is super important right now because actually what's really amazing about the current time that we're in right now is that we're just entering into period 9. And in this current phase, we are accessing a higher octave of genetic available information. So up until this point, most of us are kind of working between the first 13 dimensional layers of the body. And the majority of us, really, we're kind of mostly working between, the first and fourth dimensions of the body. That's the fourth chakras in the body. And so usually the first three is everything having to do with your physical engagement with the world around you, your emotions, your survival, your relationship and creation abilities. So most of us, unfortunately, when we're asleep, we barely can learn how to master those. And what is happening now is that humanity is really being pushed where the veil has thinned so much that we can actually go beyond just these basic chakra bodies. Many people are going to be recovering a lot of ancestral memory. It's going to be easier to do shadow work so we can recover that ancestral memory. We're having contact experiences, we're having sightings, we're having more intuitive activity. And that's just going to grow and grow in the next, especially next up until 2027 and then 2035. We're going to see an entire kind of new human emerging, which is both really advanced intelligence and a lot of psychic abilities that are the potential. So we have the capacity to rewrite and to change. DNA literally, it's scientifically proven that DNA can actually be formed into syntax, like meaning. It can be like a language, and in fact, our language emerges from DNA. So if we can learn how to use the sounds of our words with intention, we can actually change how we work with our physical body, its energy. We can direct certain emotional states in the body that changes the geometrical structure of how we're holding this crystalline body. The body is very much a solidified form of frequency, and that memory is encoded in the DNA. So we can actively change the construct of our frequency in the body by sound waves, intention, and energy frequency.
I'm kind of curious when you talk about the DNA being like a syntax language. That sounds like something like computers run on syntax languaging in a form of. So, does that mean like we could download our DNA into like a clone body and therefore only what the DNA knows will be in the clone? And that's why some people say like we can't make perfect copies of ourselves because it doesn't we can't copy everything. Or is that I'm jumping at a leap and trying to make a connection that's too far out there and not really there?
No, clones are very much a thing that actually, the government itself, the shadow government, does have certain cloning programs that they have been experimenting since the 50s. And the beauty of DNA is that DNA functions in one of the beautiful laws of the universe, which is that everything is formulated in fractal form. So DNA is also holding at the cellular level a fractal of the entire body's information. So you can take DNA and create an entire organism from that information. And this is utilized in some of these cloning programs as well as the hybridization program. That's precisely what it's about. Our primordial life force, our sexual energy, is one of the most powerful, potent energies because we have the core DNA blueprint in our sexual energy, and so it's one of the most powerful substances. And so, in terms of cloning, cloning is definitely possible, and it is happening. But there is a difference between organic technology and artificial technology. And right now, we're kind of going in the direction of artificial technology, where a lot of this biological data is being mimicked by artificial intelligence. And a lot of biological experimentations utilizing DNA, splicing DNA, taking parts of it and rewriting to create new organisms is also occurring now. But something that science is going to catch up to understand probably soon enough is that DNA is kind of it's an entire language model that is it's a very unified system. So when you remove something, you really don't understand the consequences of the editing of that until much later, because it requires the whole system in its entirety to function in harmony. So we're kind of the same. And when we take from our human body DNA to create another organism, it does hold the entire system. It can hold the markers of this physical body depending on how we utilize that genetic data. So it really just depends on how we're using that information and what genes we're turning on and off in the new organism. Some of these clones that are being created are actually deactivating certain parts of ourselves in order to create those clones that are a little more dumbed down, you can say, or have less interdimensional capacity. Usually, the information from the original donor is the one that holds the core primordial life force and soul essence encoded at the cellular level. So it's a little different how that's done.
I'm curious. There's a question in the chat room, but before we get there, I want to ask something for all the people who feel like, they have had their DNA taken from them by the shadow government. And my question to you is, as we grow and change our DNA, does that nullify the DNA that they have stored and no longer connect to us? And so if we change our DNA, we basically get free of them? Or does a part of it still stay connected because there's that base code?
Yeah, amazing question. In reality, um, through entanglement, we are all and nothing simultaneously. There are cells of us in stars, in universes far away, and vice versa. So we are all one organism. Every single one of us is interconnected as one with one another. And so DNA, it functions in that way. Um, it's very interesting. In the same way that we can create clones and we can affect those clones, in the same way we can affect our children that we create, either terrestrial children or through the hybridization program, we do have a certain level of influence if we learn how to master our physical vessel, the origin point of the data, of the genetic data, because we are entangled. So this is really important for those that are hybrid parents, and that have connections and other aspects, fractals of yourself that exist on other dimensions. Like for example, super soldier type programs or MK Ultra programs like that take clones and then kind of make them do other things that you're not aware of. We can integrate the fractals of ourselves etherically, and we can do that by learning how to create massive conductivity in this body. We produce something called the 0 point. And when we embody the 0 point, our bodies are bioelectrical. This organism is a bioelectrical system. So when we become highly conductive, that's actually when we can begin to actually affect other fractals of ourselves that are created in other dimensions, even on this planet. We can affect our children, we can affect the clones, let's say, or any other fractals of yourself in other dimensions. So this is where we begin to access that kind of like Christ consciousness that we've talked about through history. That Jesus was an example of this enlightened being that had the ability to have a mastery over matter. And essentially, that's a symbolism, and it's an example of our potential. When we access our highest faculties and we develop those higher faculties by producing high conductivity, our DNA changes into its full complex form. We begin to access genes and turn on the memory through the bioelectrical body, through the morphogenetic field, and begin to access activity and mastery over these dimensional levels. So basically, what that means is that we become lucid in the waking state, and we also become lucid in our dream state. And our dream state is in the astral planes. That is when we have access to a lot of this activity that happens. Government programs have technology to kind of affect the astral body through frequencies. And they can manipulate and kind of work with our psychology through sound waves, music, even the food that we're eating, for a very long time is kind of designed to kind of slow down and kind of, unfortunately, deconstruct the potential of our DNA. In a kind of silent eugenics program that's been happening since the origin of time. And that's something that we have to be very aware of, that when the human that is a vibrational frequency breaks away from that hypnosis and that kind of dormant state of disconnect to the natural order, we can actually come into really powerful potential and no longer be parasitized by some of these more parasitic groups.
Very cool. And I want to take a moment and sidestep because Nathan Correcula, I hope I'm saying your name correctly, was asking earlier as we were talking about changing your DNA and everything. He was asking, where does this information come from? How interesting. And then there was a second part he brought up saying, I was in the military for 14 years, still can't sleep more than 4 hours a night. I wake every day at 3:30. Also have an implant in my toe from my time in the military.
Yeah, super interesting. Well, Nathan, I would love to invite you to my support group where I go really deep into these topics. But definitely, um, military families have a very interesting genetic history, and we might think that it's kind of random that we have a lot of military in our family, but it's really not based on my research. And so, all this information that I'm sharing with you is research that I've done, for many years. And also, some of these things have been researched heavily in other people have done a lot of research on this as well. I tried to combine a lot of medical research papers that have been put out with this etheric understanding of our multidimensional body. So the military families have a lot of really interesting traits going down their family lineage. As a psychotherapist, I've spent the last kind of 15 years interviewing families of contactees and people that have had, military abductions and MK Ultra type of experiences. And what I've discovered is that actually this activity goes down the family bloodline. And usually, if father has it, grandpa has it, and then so on and so on, down the family lineage. And the DNA apparently seems to hold. The target point is essentially family bloodlines that are descendants from main key bloodlines in history. Okay, so we all have kind of like a main origin, Mesopotamia, supposedly, because based on my research, we have many origins further, much. The human race has existed on this planet much longer than we understand. So, based on our current understanding of history, the origin of Mesopotamia, which is the most easily known, we have certain very unique bloodlines from which this Christic consciousness model was kind of branching off. And so, a lot of these ancient knowledge and understanding about energy healing, sacred sexuality, things like this, sacred sexual energy, what I mean, has been really suppressed through history. And a lot of the families that were born into some of these schools of understanding and education were kind of gently through inbreeding and also specifically chosen into certain family bloodlines, especially royal family bloodlines. The information started to kind of weed out of the mainstream. And it was suppressed. And so, what I find is that a lot of these military families are descendants from some of these bloodlines, and they are utilized because in their DNA, the same way that we inherit trauma. So, scientifically shown, we inherit 40 generations of trauma in our DNA that can be accessed, and we are literally playing and repeating that trauma out. We also are repeating etheric activity. So, for example, if we have a lot of psychics in our bloodline, that is also going to be passed down through the generations. People that have a lot of psychic ability have activated DNA, which means it's higher bioelectricity. This is a very valuable DNA. And this is the DNA that's kind of targeted by these governmental groups because they can use it as a portal to access many kind of dimensional layers through the human. So the human is utilized and parasitized on psychically, etherically in the dream state. And altars are created, as you know, in order to carry out certain programs, things like that. But many of us fall into these kinds of etheric programs because we're very asleep. We're very disconnected from ourselves. So we think dreams are just abstract experiences. We don't realize how much, when we start coming into right natural order, those dreams start to really become very important information about the activity that we're doing in our dream state. So, yeah, I'll leave it there.
It's interesting how you point out the military connection because my father was in the Navy and my great uncles were all in different branches on both sides, I believe. And my grandfather on my dad's side was military. And I was growing up and was like, my dad was like, we're keeping you out of the military and everything. And I had this innate feeling of, I never really liked going to doctor appointments because I felt like they were going to experiment on me and that the government, it's like, you know how people will, like, not to sound gross or anything, but spit on the ground. I would wait until I was either at a sink or I would swallow it because I was afraid the government would come up behind, take the DNA, and I had no idea where this came from. And
Mhm.
then talked to somebody and they were like, "Oh, yeah, it sounds like you were in MK Ultra." And I was like, "My parents wanted me out of the military
Wow,
and still
interesting.
was in the military."
Yep, 100%. Yeah, I mean, and this is not an uncommon thing. I have these in my support groups all the time, and people do basically have PTSD of unknown origin, of very strange kind of things like that. We're afraid of our DNA, we're afraid of our information or biology getting out because we have had some of that trauma, and that is something that does happen. So, yeah, it's amazing.
So we have another question from the chat room. Kids Like Hell. She's asking, she's heard people are more susceptible to mind control from the whose parents were mind controlled. And I think what she's referring to is like the military connection, because the military has mind controlled you into creating you as this soldier and then released you. That's transferred down to the children, and so maybe that's why the children are picked, is because they have that are they more susceptible, or is that like a fluke and it just looks that way and everyone's actually equal in this?
Well, to be honest, these programs are global and they're happening on really many deep levels that if we really understood the depth of them, we would, I don't know what would happen. But there have been these kinds of silent eugenics programs, especially after World War II, for the purpose of trying to manipulate and kind of hijack psychologically and limit psychic potential in humanity. Okay, so we need to understand what that really means because that is the limitation of your DNA potential. That's huge. To answer your question, who is targeted? So there because bioelectricity, because the human body produces bioelectricity, the people that are more psychic, people that have a lot of astral projection, remember, memory is one of the highest forms of understanding how your level of bioelectricity is functioning in your body. The more bioelectrical conductive you are, the more you remember everything. Past lives, future lives, fractals, alien lives, all these aspects of yourself you begin to remember. And that creates a really large force field in the field. Um, this is monitored in societies. Okay, so whoever has a really large force field is felt. As we know, we disrupt electrical objects when someone is super psychic and has like a lot of contact activity. They have a different kind of relationship with electrical and technology. Okay, so this is kind of like monitored by these systems, and it is true that those that have high bioelectricity are definitely targeted and utilized for these kinds of programs. It really is up to us to understand how to utilize our energy in order to cloak ourselves and to use this etheric technology to protect and alchemize that kind of targeting. And we 100% can. So it is true that certain military families are more targeted, or psychic families especially, because their bioelectrical field is huge. And what that really means, not only does it mean that you are bioelectrical and your field is large, but also you see, our DNA is a portal. So if you have some of your DNA, you can use that in order to access millions of libraries of genetic data. So we are star seeds, and a lot of us have in our DNA, we can have Lyran, Arcturian, Pleiadian, Reptilian, Draconian bloodlines that we've been hybridized from. What every single one of those species in our DNA means is that we have access to the entire ancestral lineage of that species through our DNA. That's how valuable hybridized DNA is, essentially. And that planet Earth is that. We are a product of that. So we are an incredible source, library source of information. So this is something that is utilized, and the more access you have to the memory of the species that you are connected to, you also inherit those abilities. So you can inherit a lot of technological abilities, you can inherit psychic abilities, healing abilities, a plethora of abilities that we have access to actually. So yeah, to make sure that I answer that question, um, mind control. So usually those that are utilized in these programs, they have a lot of psychic ability already. Otherwise, you're not much use in these programs of mind control, really, because they can fractalize your consciousness, make alters, and those alters are then switched on and off depending on what's needed. Okay, so we're manipulated by music, by sound, by frequencies, and we might not even realize that. So a good example of that is young ladies that are taken into these MK Ultra programs and highly sexualized in order to get information or utilized to carry out hybridization programs of the parasitic nature. And it's turned on and off by music. We have our youth that listens to music and doesn't realize how affected they are. Okay, so yes, mind control is passed down through generations, and the reason for that is because in our DNA we hold more psychic ability in those bloodlines. Yeah.
So I have a question about the bioelectric aspect of us, and one thing I've never been able to explain or comprehend is if I put a watch on my wrist, the battery goes dead. A solar powered watch will go dead in a matter of days. Same thing with the light charging battery. I simply cannot wear any type of watch on my wrist. Is that because of my bioelectric field, or is it something else that's interfering with that technology?
Yeah, this is actually something really common. I actually have a similar, I guess, uh, symptom, I guess you can say. The same thing happens, and it happens to a lot of people that have a lot of contact experiences and are very lucid in their dream states. They can actually, they are having a lot of experiences interdimensionally. Every time that we're able, because you see, interdimensional navigation is like a radio station. So when we switch radio stations into, a higher frequency, it kind of shifts the frequency of the whole body. So that's actually what's happening. So those of us that are more connected, we have a hard time with technology. But you see, technology is going to be changing very soon, like tremendously, into a more organic technology or artificial technology, not to be confused with organic human technology, which is totally different. But our technology will be changing in a way that it's going to be more communicative and interactive with our organism. We already have telepathic technology coming, so that's already being used in a lot of advertising. So yeah, it's going to change. Our relationship with technology will change as it catches up to this kind of bioelectrical technology. But the answer is yes. It's because our fields are large, and then to break that down, our human body functions like a toroidal field, and our first three chakras manage the physical realm. So if we have a lot of imbalanced emotions in our body, for example, our first three chakras are out of balance or blocked or stagnant. So that creates a block in the toroidal flow of energy. The more that we clear out some of these programs, as you're doing, you begin to clear up space for this energy to move more fluidly through the body, and that expands your light body. You can begin to integrate the lower three chakras, which is called the lower dantian. The heart is love, compassion is the alchemical life force that transmutes matter into this infinite potential. So we learn how to become this highly conductive organism of co-creation. So that's what you're doing, and that means that you can enter in and out of dimensions. And our electrical gadgets are very low frequency in comparison, so that's why they become disrupted when we enter. We engage with them sometimes. Yeah.
That makes sense because ever since I was a little kid, I've been like in the astral plane, and
Yeah.
it was funny is there was one day where I was talking to my mom who was a medium, and I was saying to them, I can't go out of body. I'm stuck. What's going on? And they said, we've taken away your ability to astral because you're spending too much time over there. You need to spend some time here.
Wow.
And so I always laugh about that I actually got kicked out, but then I got the ability to go back. But I've often wondered why, and if it's program related, that it was like second nature. Nobody taught me how to do it. It's just something I just did and going out of body. And so is that something typical of being, like you're saying, the hybrid star seed, or is that something that was programmed into me that somehow I remembered even though I wasn't supposed to?
Actually, that's our natural state. That is the optimum natural functioning of human. We have been programmed to believe that that's not the natural state, that that's something rare. And unfortunately, many people have no idea about these things. So the fact that you came in awake, I mean, obviously you have a lot of your hybrid DNA activated, you have a lot of your memory activated. That's incredible. Your family is super activated, and you're here doing your purpose. You're here to be of service to humanity in such a powerful way. So, the kind of infinite potential and source that you anchor onto this planet is really meaningful. And this is our natural state, and it's when we can tap into abundance, healing. um, you know uh, we can tap into telepathy, which should be a natural tool that we all have. Remote viewing should be something we all do naturally. So we're kind of remembering, and you're kind of holding space for us to catch up, basically, you know. And so the invitation is really that we start to recover the memory of who we are, and the first step is essentially to do the shadow work through the emotional body. Our emotions are like bioelectrical charges of creation. So if we're constantly in states of fear, sadness, and anger, you're really just using really slow moving frequencies for your creation. So nothing can really move from there. So as you start clearing that up, the human becomes super co creative. Um, yeah. So that's amazing, Michael.
Well, and another thing that I've noticed, well, and thank you for that, is I have always been able to surprise doctors by having a fast healing ability.
I'm sure.
Even when I broke my leg, he was like, within a month, it was fused back, but he was like, let's take it easy and let's make sure, before we start physical therapy, let's make sure this is holding. But I've noticed lately when I'm home in my environment, my ability to heal remains constant at the fast speed. But when I'm on the road, and if I get like a scratch where I tear the skin, I notice it doesn't heal as fast
Mm.
and takes longer. And is that because I'm out of my environment, or is it because the body is being exhausted by being on the road and it's slowing down everything?
Yeah, I think it's two things, right? So how we heal is two ways: psychological and etheric. So we got to take a look at both sides. Psychologically, if there's any kind of program or belief system that says when I'm not in my environment, that's probably really safe, and you probably put a lot of energy in your home, healing energy, and you have good environment around you. Maybe there's a subconscious program that when we move out of our environment, then we're not as powerful. So that might be an invitation to really check in with our self doubt, or any kind of little tiny seeds of doubt that we might have on any level of your self trust, your self healing capacities, and your potential. That would be where I would go first. Secondly, is etheric. So it could be that where we're going, there's too much interference energetically. Okay. And really, when we're really real masters of our healing, nothing should get in the way of your self-healing potential. But it's hard, because we have to be really in our state. We have to be in that 0 point to be able to tap into these abilities. So yeah, it's just a matter of cultivating and growing our field. So next time you experience that, I would invite that you really expand your field, open your heart, your throat, your third eye, work with your crown, and then anchor your life force in your body, and then see if that will change the capacity of how fast you're healing. Because if you already have that ability, it's innately encoded in you. It's just the mind that gets in the way. That's usually the mind is what gets in the way.
That makes sense because, as I was mentioning, always going into the ethereal or the astral easily is I figured out how to create a world. And I also created a space that's like a sanctuary space where it's a place where I go and regenerate before returning to my body because I
Mhm.
learned I can be hurt in the astral plane and I bring it back with me. And so it's like instead of explaining to everyone why my arm is hurting when I didn't all I was doing was sleeping, I go and I regenerate. And so it's interesting how you're talking about on the etheric level. And again, I naturally just figured it out.
Exactly. I mean, Michael, obviously you have a lot of that memory restored already. This is exactly what I teach in my experiencer groups, especially for people that are recovering from PTSD, from contact experiences that are traumatizing. Whether it's a hybridization program or some kind of other experience, we can literally heal in the astral plane, just like you're doing. I teach this to my students, so it's amazing that you have that information already. This stuff, these are things that used to be taught in all the ancient literatures that have been hidden. But this is knowledge that is known, and I'm so glad that you trust yourself. And
I gotta admit, it's hard because everybody wants to tell you how, no, you shouldn't be able to do that. No, that's not something you can do. And so it's like you keep it to yourself, and it's like, you don't mean it to be like a secret, but it's hard to explain to people because everybody is like not on the same page. And so it's like you
yeah,
start getting these looks, and you're like, yeah, I don't need that anymore in my life. So just stop talking about it.
you got to trust yourself. Also, maybe other people are here to teach us other ways of healing too. So, everybody has to go on their own journey. That's why I say the spiritual work is a very personal thing. So is contact experiences, because they are literally, we create them. We're co-creating, right? So they're experiencing with us, we're experiencing with them, and we're learning. And the key is that every single human, through their vibrational frequency, creates a new signature of valuable information that can only come through their DNA. That's every single human has their own library of information that they're anchoring into the planet. So yeah, but I do have to say that there is a certain architecture to this etheric levels, and I'm reading Gurdjieff, I'm reading all these ancient Taoist scriptures, and they're encountering the same thing that I encountered. I didn't read those books before I had these experiences. Just like you, this stuff came innate to me. And then later, when I started to research, I'm like, oh my God, people, they know about this. Like, they've been doing this for a long time. So there seems to be a certain order. I believe there are certain laws of the universe which we innately abide by, and then in the creative realm, we mix it up. We experiment and grow and expand more.
Very cool. And Nathan is asking, he thinks he's 100% human and wants to know, is being a pure human a good thing?
Well, that's an interesting question. Based from my perspective and the research that I've been doing, I really do not believe, and also our genetic history, I don't believe that we are pure human 100% biologically in any way. I mean, just the natural jump of how our DNA has changed from Homo sapien into the modern human is really large, right? We've evolved tremendously, and there was definitely an aid to that. So I don't believe that we're superhuman, especially if you're here on this channel listening to this conversation. I highly doubt that you're. Um, Besides the actual human, actually to be human, every single in this planet Earth, imagine the planet Earth like a living organism. We are the cells of this organism called the planet Earth, and you know, we kind of evolve through stages. First, we're humans. We're the cells of these planets. Then we evolve into many lifetimes as humans. Then we evolve into other species. Then we can evolve into planets, universes. So we are really infinite potential, experiencing many things. And remember that time is also not linear; it's spherical. So we actually, because of the fractal model of this universe, we're experiencing many things simultaneously. And yeah, the key is not to be limited. Don't get attached or identify with any one thing that you discover about yourself. We have to continue that learning. That's the most compassionate way to exist in this universe that is ever changing and evolving.
And on that note, Iron Bear 78 has an interesting question for you. Would problem solving be considered an ability? I'm good at figuring stuff out when I have no knowledge about it.
Yeah, that's actually um, it's a complex question because you see, some of our problem solving information is something that comes from the construct which we've adopted, right? Perhaps we've been indoctrinated by our understanding of science and physics, and we do need to understand, and what will happen in the next 3 years especially, is that all the old sciences, all the old belief structures are going to crumble, and we're going to come into a completely new way of existing and coexisting in this world. So if our problem solving ideas and concepts are coming from a limited old structure, we're going to be kind of limited in the expansiveness of that problem solving ability. However, if you're tapping into knowledge that you think you don't have it, you're actually channeling information, you're downloading some of that information from the field, your potential is infinite. So the invitation is experiment trying to download that information, and exercise that, because that's your intuitive faculty. And when we connect to the Akashic field, when we access information from our crown chakra, which is the portal into the higher self, we actually have information. We can know everything, and it is available through us. So, yeah, interesting question. And yes, it's an ability, but you see, as I'm saying, it depends which way you look at it.
I often thought about it as accessing past life memories and
Yeah,
going and saying, maybe I had a past life as a scientist, so I therefore can recall this information about this, even though I've never studied it right now in this current life. And so it's interesting, all the different ways that we can access information if we just ironically get out of our heads and just do it.
exactly. 100%. You said it. Yeah.
And I'm also curious, and I'm wanting to make sure I get this right. You, in your bio, you mentioned two things that we haven't hit on yet, but I wanted to make sure we brought up because one sounds like something I may be familiar with, but not fully familiar with, and one I'm curious what it is, and that is your medical pranic healing and intuitive life force cultivation mastering.
Yeah. So during so when I first started going through when I had my experience in 2013, I went into a retreat for about 4 months. My partner passed away, and that kind of really pushed me into kind of going into these questions, these big picture questions, right? And so during that retreat, I began to access my emotions, and that's where I began to kind of go back to the history of my emotional programming. What happens is, to my surprise, is that I began to recover memories of being even in the crib, even in childhood. And then I began to recover memories of past lives. I literally went through hundreds of past lives where I began to kind of learn how we're kind of repeating the same information over and over again. So essentially, what that allowed me to understand is that we are recovering. We have access to these memories, and we can activate and heal the body by reintegrating the fractals of ourselves that are created by those traumas. And after that, in 2013, right, during at the end, basically at the end of those 4 months, is when I had my contact experience. And a bright light entered the room, and I was taken out of my room into a craft. And this craft, many things happened. My aunt was there, and she actually recalls having that experience separately. Um, I was taken to the planet Maya and the Pleiades, and I was shown that I was Pleiadian several lifetimes, simultaneous lifetimes. I was introduced to hybrid children, and then I was shown the matrix and the physics and the structure of our biological systems, how we interact in the matrix. And as a result of that experience, I activated psychic abilities that were so powerful that I couldn't leave my house for like 4 months after that. I could hear the conversations of my neighbors 3 houses down, what they were saying. So the sensitivity was so. Did you have that too?
Yep.
Oh gosh, that's incredible. Yeah. So, it was, I couldn't, what I could see was basically the whole multidimensional body. I would see people like these huge, giant bodies of light. I could feel what they're feeling, think what they're thinking. Everything just was completely transparent to me. And what I did with that in these 4 months that I couldn't leave my house is study my body. And I began to research what my energy systems are doing. What happens when I start to feel an emotion? What happens when I move the energy in certain ways? Basically, I understood how to really understand our organism. And I this turned into an ability that when I would connect with people to understand what are their ailments, both physically, psychologically, etherically, and to begin to help them with that. First, starting at the emotional level, because most of our illnesses have a somatic root, and that somatic root is emotional, and it's like psychological and etheric. So I kind of turned this into a modality that I call DNA reprogramming. And I work with people to deprogram those limiting core belief systems to access greater health. Basically, in simple terms, it's opening the energy field to allowing source to move in a very fluid toroidal manner, accessing the bioelectricity of the body. So that's I went back to school to learn medical qigong and medical pranic healing because it was the closest and most complete body of study that had been done on the energy body. And I found myself even correcting some things that I was learning there, and it was a very resourceful thing to learn. So I just used it to support what I had been knowing because I always need to question what I know and kind of research the scientific evidence of that, how it actually functions. So yeah, that's how I got started in that.
I'm curious because I had a teacher who showed me, like, when you look at the word disease, it's dis-ease. It's
Yes.
just you're out of comfort and you're out of whack. And so you're not ill, you're just not in alignment. So you need to get back in alignment. And I always notice, like, the 24-hour bug, I would have it for like 2 to 4 hours and be done with it.
Yes.
And so I'm wondering if that's because she showed me that and it allowed me to reprogram it to where I don't, like, I can be sneezing and I will still say I'm not sick. Even
One,
though I have symptoms of it, I will say I'm not sick. And, it takes me a little bit, but I will recover faster, I think, than most people probably would. Is that Was that part of that reprogramming where my mind looks at it in a different way and so the body reacts to it differently?
100%, 100%. And I'm exactly just like you. And so what's interesting, because illness it's a belief. And you said it right. Anytime that we come out of harmony, the body becomes sick. So if you have certain intuitive feelings about something and something external is triggering you and you're not able to integrate those emotions, that disconnect creates a disassociation with the body, and essentially we can go into big cycles of illness. And there's other parts to illness. Illness are messengers. They tell us where we need to pay attention. Illness can also be ancestral. So we can inherit very profound belief systems. For example, if down our bloodline we have many generations, let's say sexual abuse, and the women in the bloodline have so much sexual abuse that they have contracted their creative ability. They don't feel safe to create anymore. So what happens is the next generation start to have severe illnesses in the womb, for example. For they can no longer have children, or they have severe, sexual problems. So this is also true. Illness is not just that, it's not a one and done kind of thing. It's a constant maintenance of coming into harmonic order. Some of us have those lessons much deeper than others. Some of us have to heal generations of ancestral belief systems that we have not integrated. So, but ultimately, when the human learns how to come into harmonic order, they can either really heal themselves completely. We have stories like Dr. Joe Dispenza. I think Anita Morjani is another incredible story of how she recovered from cancer, stage 4 cancer, within weeks. I am dealing with these kinds of stories all the time, because once the human comes into that harmonic order and they decide, I no longer need this illness to teach me this lesson or to remind me of something, the body can actually heal. And it's up to you, but it's based on your belief system. If at the core you have a doubt, or you don't believe, or you don't believe in trust in yourself, that illness might not be finished yet. So it's a learning lesson. I always tell myself I don't need to be sick. When we have certain illnesses like colds or flus, every single part of the body is the body self-organizes psychological and emotional information. It compartmentalizes information. So every single part of your body is holding different frequencies of thought forms that form into specific illnesses, and we can map those out. In Chinese medicine, this is really beautifully studied, how every single part of the body through the meridian lines is holding certain emotional memory. And so, sometimes, what is it called? Acupuncture can be really great for opening those energy centers, and the person can heal better. But to really heal, it's in the mind. It's a mindset. It's a belief system, as you said.
So I got three questions that kind of are in sync. But before I ask those, there's one thing I'm curious and I want to kind of quote unquote pick your brain about is my mother and I have a discussion of, oh, you need, say, vitamin C. So she'll go take a vitamin C pill. I go, I don't need the pill. I can just pull in the essence of vitamin C, infuse it into the body, done. And she's like, I think having the pill, you don't have to take it, you stick it in your pocket, is a more of an anchor. Are both of those correct, or is one more effective than the other?
The thing is that in this day and age, we live in a time where we have a lot of different kinds of targeting against our health in really deep ways. So our minds, for the most part, have become very weak. We don't believe that we have that potential. If you have that potential, then you can do it. But you also have to sustain other systems in natural harmony. So what we eat, what we think, what we feel, the activities that we're doing, our human bodies have a certain structure of optimum function. And so we have to maintain these natural orders. We have to, have movement in the body, energetically, physically. And I think science is helping us understand how we actually work better nowadays. We're learning so much more about our biology than ever before. But our food, the way that it's made, the way that it's cropped, so many chemicals, so much GMO, so much you know chemicals that are put just in our plants and in our fruits, and we take all of that into our body. So we kind of have to work 20 times harder, unfortunately, unless we completely eat everything organic and healthy. um, and this is what the human is truly kind of battling against at this time. So try to eat as organic as possible. Try to come into emotional harmony as much as possible. Go out in nature, exercise in order to really stimulate. Exercise is not just about the physical body, it's about the biochemistry of the body, because we're not only bioelectrical but biochemical. And essentially that chemistry in the body, when we don't know how to trigger the proper chemistry, we can go into inflammation and a plethora of immune targeting illnesses, right? So that's through the emotional body. So those are some things that we have to balance out. I have done what you do with vitamin deficiencies, and I've been able to help myself. And then there are other times when, let's say, life is really hard and I haven't been able to tap into that ability. So, in order to tap into that ability, we really have to stay in a very specific state. Your mind, your heart have to be integrated in order to be able to do that. So, for the general public, you need to support yourself. I listen very carefully to what my body needs. If it needs to eat more oranges or it craves oranges, then I know that the body needs some kind of vitamin from that fruit and that vegetable. So, we've just become so disconnected from our bodies and our true needs. And we're driven by parasites. We're driven by psychological parasites, emotional parasites in the biome that make us addicted to sugars because our emotions are imbalanced. So we can never really know what's really going on. We're confused, we're disconnected. So, there's a certain level of kind of coming back to this harmonic order that we need to work through. So I do think that it's possible, just like you, and I've done it myself. But in order to really do that, we have to be in a certain mindset. Otherwise, you need to support yourself intuitively, even with pharmaceuticals, if you need to, until you start to come into harmonic order emotionally, psychologically, and regain that trust in your healing potential. But this is self-healing abilities are something that we must learn in the next 3-4 years, because what's coming is a major transformation of the pharmaceutical industry, which will become frequency based, genetic based, and it's going to change the game completely. So we really need to be on top of our health. I will say that.
So is that referring kind of to what they're calling the med beds? Is the genetic and holographic frequencies?
Medbeds, I don't know who came up with medbeds concept originally. I don't recall right now who did that, but medbeds is the concept of a technology that heals the body completely, right, from the inside out, like a holographic technology. um, I do think that that is something that will be potentially available to us. And it is available to us in different ways now. But what I'm talking about is genetic splicing and editing of our illnesses in order to change the genetic order, whether that's with pharmaceuticals, or that's some kind of incorporated technology into the body. This is going to be huge right now. Genetic engineering of our physical body is going to be huge. Every single genetic engineer cure is going to be coming out right now. The problem with this, it sounds amazing, but the problem is it's too early because we don't understand how complex and complete the genetic structure functions. When you take a certain part out, it affects the entire whole. And that's something that unfortunately we're going to see the side effects of these experimentations, because right now they're experimentations, in the long run. What I see in the future is that humanity is in a split right now. One direction, we're going to go in the direction of transhumanism. The other direction we're going into is that of organic technology. Humans that go and fall into the fad of artificial intelligence and being implanted cures, transformations, overnight healings, and things like that will have a lot of disruption in their bioelectrical field when we really need it in the coming years. Because when we talk about evolution, we're not just talking about global transformation, we're talking about a shift in frequency. We are frequency beings. Our body has to align and evolve in harmony with this shift. If we don't, and if we don't know how, we will definitely die. And we die through illnesses, through mental manipulation, so many different ways that we are going to, hurt our bodies and our minds. There have already been several waves that have been put out, as we know, in the past 3-4 years to target certain bloodlines specifically. And so this is something that we kind of have to recover from, and we have to heal our bodies. We have to learn how to heal the body. So yeah, so the technology that I'm really talking about is implants, genetic engineering, things like that. It's gonna be like shown as if it's the next big thing and everyone needs to run and do it. And there are some of those technologies that will be beneficial for humanity. But for a lot of those things, we're going to see the side effects of that in the future, and it's not going to be good. So that's something that we have to pay attention to.
Right. And so I know we're a little bit over the hour. There's some questions in the chat room. Do you have time to answer some of
Yeah,
them?
I do if you do. It's up to you. Yeah.
I do.
Okay.
I am like digging this conversation and learning so much, and I'm so thankful for you sharing this with us.
Thank you. I'm enjoying it
So,
too.
thank you. And so the first question up is Woo Riders DG Derek. He says, Geraldine, what can one do when people close to you, say family members, just can't seem to let go of the past and continue to live their lives based on the past, especially family members?
So the number one thing I say for this is we need to embody compassion. But what is compassion? Compassion not just as an emotional state, but as an example. The biggest way to help our family, because we are entangled, and when we're entangled, we function by resonance. So we were not born in this family in a wrong, there's no wrong thing. We were never born in a family by mistake. We are exactly where we need to be in order to evolve and ascend our soul potential. Okay, so the key is that do your shadow work. You do this shadow work in order to access the patterns that need to be ended in order to no longer to continue to repeat the suffering that was done in that past experience. If we learn how to no longer recreate those patterns right now, your frequency shifts and changes. This also changes the way we interact with our family members. You see, these patterns, it can be that maybe in the past we were not as kind or loving or whatever it is. So we made mistakes, we caused suffering to other people. If in this current moment your actions are congruent with your intentions, your integrity of your ability to love unconditionally, and you have integrity with your words, your actions, your thoughts, they all match, they're in alignment. The way that you are, your expression, your presence is going to change. That change, that shift in your presence is what affects our family members through the field. And we activate our family members through our internal work because your entire frequency changes. So, my invitation is we can never change people, we can never convince them otherwise. They have to find their own way, they have to understand for themselves that their belief system harms themselves rather than anyone else. And unfortunately, that's up to them. But we can help them by shifting our understanding of our current present awareness. And two, we can work with our contractual agreements. So I want you to see your crown chakra in meditation. Shine your light in meditation on your family members. Take a look at the contract. Ask to be shown your agreement. If this contract is really big, we have a lot of shared karma and information that we have to learn and work through. So we can dissolve these agreements completely, and they allow us to kind of open space. It's also important to cut cords daily. This will help reset the old energy, help them freshen up the energy that's being thrown back and forth so that they can have an opportunity to shift their perception. So those are just a couple tools that I'll share for now.
Thank you for that. And the next question comes from two people. It's the three that I feel like are entwined questions. And I'm going to tweak a little bit of it at the end. The first question comes from Quitzly Hell, and she says, does this mean children can cure their own cancer? And then Iron Bear goes on to say, what about inherited diseases like Parkinson's, which he has, because they say it's neurological, but could it be a lot to do with his chakras being out of work or out of whack? And my little twist to that is, how can we help as the generation we are teach the newer generations coming how to do it?
100%. So we need to understand how we function. We have to kind of read the manual, the user manual of the human body. Now, the thing is that this shadow government and these systems know you better than you know yourself. And that's the sad part, right? We're so distracted by social media, by consumerism, by survivalism, that we are so disconnected from ourselves, from nature. Nature provides us with information of natural order and helps us come back into that natural order, into harmony. Nature, even just being in nature, brings the body into symmetry and harmonic order energetically, which is why bodies can heal better when we are more in nature. And we download and we learn those patterns of harmonic order by being connected to nature. So we need to come back to that. How we can learn that is by coming back to that connection with nature. We begin to move out of that the lie that we need to live in survival. That's a very primitive state of existing, into a state of co-creation and harmony. And that is not just something that we hear that and we're like, oh, bunch of bullshit. That's not even true. That's not going to happen. We need to get past this collective trauma. That is what's happening right now in our world. We are healing the divine feminine, which is why in period 9, which is what's starting right now, period 9, we're healing the divine feminine. And essentially, the healing of the divine feminine is the healing of our trust with our intuition. We're learning to trust again. We have generations of burning of inquisitions, right? The burning of the witches, the persecution of all the indigenous races that held all this ancient knowledge, eradicated from the earth. We have that in our genetic history. So we have to heal that. And all of these illnesses that are descending down our bloodline in our children are a manifestation of the lack of the healing for many generations. So, for example, cancer in our children, our beautiful little babies that are born with this cancer, we have been holding and suppressing certain kind of autoimmune diseases for many generations. the key for healing is that we begin to do our internal work as the parent. We have to heal those programs in ourselves to help the child heal, because we are one energetic unit when we're parents. Okay. So as we start to heal that kind of programming, we hold space for the child, and the child can tap in through the field information to help them heal, regenerate, and let go of that cancer illness. Now, it doesn't mean that it can be necessarily eradicated and cured overnight. Sometimes we need to understand that every soul comes here with their own life choice experience. So the child, it did come in with the decision to experience this illness. And we have to also understand that. That requires a little bit of spiritual maturity in order to understand that the child is also have to choose whether it's going to heal or live in that illness. There's lessons for that. There's ancestral healing for that is occurring. Okay, so sorry, there's so much more I want to say, but I know we don't have that much time, but definitely reach out to me if you want support on that. I can kind of lend you some more information. And I do talk a lot about this on my YouTube channel, so you can check that out. So with the other question about Parkinson's, for example, yeah, so it is neurological, right? So again, patterns of when there has been severe, like psychological mental doubt for many generations begins to affect the nervous system. If we have not been able to hold our energetic system properly for many generations, that's what we're learning how to recover. So every illness has a somatic root. If we can learn to deprogram the belief system of that root, we can heal the body. And if not heal entirely, we can learn to live with this illness in a way that we can still reach our potential. We can do what we came here to do. Live joyfully, in harmony, in peace, which is the most important. Okay. So yeah, I'll stop right there.
So in other words, we learn to defy the odds.
Exactly. We can definitely do it. We just have to trust ourselves, and we have to not believe this matrix that keeps telling us that we don't have the ability to heal ourselves.
Right. And so the next question, it kind of reminded me of a question too that I had. And Derek is asking, what does Geraldine think of so-called junk DNA? And my question that I was thinking about with the extra strands of DNA, because I don't think of them as junk, is so we have a double helix in the 3D realm. If we ascend to the fourth, fifth, sixth, do those certain number of strands start to activate?
Yes. Yes, the answer is yes. Our DNA is holographic. Our DNA, every single strand of DNA is connected to multiple dimensions. And basically, our current DNA right now, being the 12 standard DNA, is managing the 13 main bodies in the physical body. 12 and 13. It's we actually have 13, but we see it as 12. Because 13 is the beginning of the next, and that's how the energy kind of intertwines. Okay, so in this universe, information, infinite potential is self-organized within these 13 main categories. And this is also ranges of frequency. It's also ranges of species that are the main root races that have seeded all of life here on this planet. So essentially, we're kind of our DNA, 2% of it writes the complexities of this physical body. Okay, all the protein writing systems that does this incredible complexity. The rest is what biologists want to call junk DNA. Now that's changing a little bit with the new research on the morphogenetic field. The morphogenetic field is essentially the instruction manual that brings into form this physical body. It tells the DNA, you're going to write the finger up until here, and then you're going to stop. So this structure, this architecture of the human body, which is encoded in the memory of the morphogenetic field, it's a bioelectrical system. We literally, a good reference for this is Michael Levin, that talks about the bioelectricity of the morphogenetic field, in that the bioelectricity is actually responsible for holding memory. It holds the memory of the form of this physical body. But now we're understanding that it also holds other memory. Within the morphogenetic field, which is what's called the junk DNA, is holding the functions of the etheric body. So our physical body is much larger than just the physical. And that's something that we really need to understand. Each layer, each strand of DNA that's connected to a dimension is connected to the layers of this etheric body within the morphogenetic field. Every gene that's turned on and off is essentially part of the formula that creates this physical body. We can activate DNA by recovering memory. It's bioelectrical. So the more memory we recover, we actually recover more memory, the more conductive we become. So the more bioelectrical conductive we become, our body functions like a toroidal field and it spins. The more we can move freely in a centripetal manner in which the energy implodes inwardly, this is where we enter the 0 point and we can enter into those dimensional layers. That is how you activate DNA. Okay, so when you are centripetal and your energy is depleted, you basically are a parasite to yourself because you are seeking externally to be filled, fulfilled, to survive. It's an entire structure of energy that is depletion, consumerism. We weaken this ability. You basically have very limited range and your DNA is not activated. It's actually going into the system of destruction, right? So this is where illnesses exist in the body. So we can actually activate our DNA. And right now, what is available to us is 24 strands of DNA. This period 9 is opening our bodies to the potential to access 24 strands of DNA, which means that we have 24 dimensional layers accessible to us. And that is why more people are going to become more psychic, more UFO activity. And UFO activity will definitely be part of this whole disclosure movement. Is going to be a catalyst for transformation in our sciences, education system in the world. So we can kind of wait to see that. But yeah, I'll leave it there.
So I'm curious, as we're talking about the morphogenetic, where you can find damaged DNA and fix it, I can't help but think about the movie Tron Evolution. I don't know if you saw that.
Tron, yeah, Tron, the new one, right?
Right.
Yeah, I love that film. Yes.
Where she has her arm severed off and he's going through the code and then finds the red code
Right.
and simply pulls it out. And the body goes, okay. And he goes, give her a little bit. And then you watch as the arm just rematerializes and
Yeah.
returns. Is that an example of what you're referring to as the body will be able to heal it by removing the damaged parts?
That's right. That is going to be the future of our medicine. And it's not that far away. I mean, we already have a lot of incredible sciences working with the phantom limbs, right? Phantom limbs, meaning that even when someone has an arm that's severed, they can still communicate with the bionic technology, the bionic arm, because through entanglement, through quantum non-locality, and through this network of bioelectrical information, it's a hologram. We are literally a hologram. And so we can communicate with technology and we can grow our body. Peter Garayev, who is a Russian scientist who was the first one that established wave genetics in Russia, was one of the first ones that was teaching people how to grow limbs. Unfortunately, he passed away. But he had an entire clinic where people were learning how to regenerate limbs in their body through the frequency of speaking specific frequency waves that is rewriting the syntax of DNA in order to rewrite the physical body. So, he was way before his time. Now, Michael Levin, with his research on the morphogenetic field, little organisms are learning how to recreate their limbs by being triggering points of the morphogenetic field that then instruct the organism to build its body back again. So these are all sciences that we are learning. The future is energy, it's bioelectricity, but we need to learn what that means, and we can be in full control of that eventually.
Right. Now, we have 3 questions in the chat room, and I feel like I might be able to get them into 2 questions. But one is, I think we can answer kind of quickly, is oops, I hit the wrong button and it just disappeared. Is Kitzley Hell was asking, um, well, I can't find it, but she was asking. She says, "I don't like the idea of someone being able to control my DNA. Who's here it is. Not sure I like the idea of having tech change my DNA. Who's in control of this?"
Ooh, that is a long, that would have to be a long answer. But, to make it short, because DNA is so valuable, because DNA is basically the blueprint of all creation, there is kind of a silent eugenics program that goes beyond. It really was solidified and established after World War II, which was focused on targeting certain bloodlines and the information that those bloodlines carry, and then dumbing down the DNA in order for humanity to slow down their progression. This is both artificially created, but also it goes along with the natural energies that we were going through at the time, because we were going through the slowest point in the progression of the universe. Right now, we're going through the highest point in the progression of the universe. So it's definitely a time for change, and we're flipping over to a harmonic order of the feminine, okay, which is the healing of the intuitive, etheric aspect of the humanity. But who is behind this are unfortunately the same people since the origin of time that have been focused on manipulating this information, on destroying ancient texts, on removing all this information about our sacred biology, sacred sexual energy. All of these informations are necessary for humanity to come into its power. So, in that same way, these systems have kind of trickled down into this umbrella system. All these companies and organizations in the world are owned by maybe 147 companies, right? And they all have the same goal in mind. They genetically modify food, our education to fit certain narratives. It also is in control of the frequency, the kind of music that we listen to, how we listen to music, the patterns of frequency that are put in television, mind control systems, social engineering. All of that is part of this kind of silent eugenics program to deconstruct our organic DNA. So we need to kind of wake up consciousness and understand that. We have 100% the power, and there are many more of us humans that are not participant in these shadow manipulations than there are those groups. So just simply take back your power, come back into sovereignty, come back into your physical body. Take ownership of where your mind, your thoughts, your emotions, and especially your fears. If you have no control over your fears, everything can be controlling you. So that's the super important thing that we need to understand. But since the beginning of the building of artificial brain, the computational brain system of artificial DNA, artificial technology, they have also collected our DNA through companies like 23andMe, Heritage, and things like that, with the illusion that we're trying to find our origins. What they have actually been doing is creating a massive database of your DNA. And we didn't understand the power of our DNA back then, so we just paid to give away our information. And that has become a massive library that was then sold to many corporations in the biotech and many other systems. That technology is what we're going to be seeing now. And we're seeing it incorporated in our cell phones that we're using, as well as many other technologies that are going to start coming out pharmaceutically, as I mentioned. So It's interesting, but systems that want to continue making money, that are oriented towards greed and money and control, they know how to hijack us from the inside out. And these are things that we have to really become aware of and break free from. So I'll answer it like that.
And I'll just piggyback by when you say, the the number of people who are out of the programs, that I know of people who are in MK Ultra and in the secret space programs that are becoming aware and breaking free of the programming, so to speak,
Yeah.
and are turning on the corporations that own them and the races that have been manipulating them. So even the people in the programs are now waking up and turning the table as well. So we truly do outnumber them.
We do. We do. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. So please don't come into fear anymore. We have to move away from the fear mongering and manipulation of these things. The purpose of this information is to empower you to understand that you have 100% control over your creation and you have free will. That is the key of the human embodiment, is that we understand how to access free will, basically.
Right. And this last question, I saved it. It came earlier, but I saved it for now because I think it's a really important question that's on a lot of mainstream and the mass, conscious mass, I forget how you call it. But Kids Like Hell, she's asking, do you know anything about the resets?
Oh yeah. Well, we're definitely at the beginning of that. As I mentioned, we're entering into period 9. And what that means is that this new era that we're entering into. So here's what I see. The transformation timeline that I'm seeing is from now until 2027. Okay, the next 2 years are going to be major transformation. We can expect to see a lot of UFO sightings that will be used in order to intimidate people. But we need to understand there's a lot of new technology that is going to be put out, that is Earth technology. It's reverse engineered, which I don't really think is reverse engineered. I think we've had the technology since the beginning. It's just been hidden away. This technology is going to be coming out. We need to learn how to differentiate the difference between government, UFOs, and etheric technology. It's completely different. Okay. Real beings, they don't need this kind of mechanical technology that we think we're seeing in the sky, and we think it's actually these etheric beings. So that's something that we need to learn and discern, because this technology is going to be, which is managed by the shadow government and also Draco reptilian races, which are very parasitic. They are the ones that are managing these kind of covert programs in shadow government. So essentially, that is going to be a catalyst for education systems. Universities are going to start falling apart because nobody's going to be paying $250,000 for an education that's based on lies. Because as we begin to uncover the true history, we won't be able to continue that lie anymore. There's going to be a lot of micro wars, especially in America, internally, about what needs to be taught in school, how we need to get our food, where we need to get that from, where do we get clean food from. So the invitation is that we begin to understand we need to connect to organic food as much as possible. Try to be as self-sufficient in as best as you can in your own home, in your own environment. Even schooling of your children will have to change. The economic system also going to change. Many jobs are going to be taken by these technologies. By 2035, you can expect to see an entire revamp of the economic system and the workforce, the way it looks. Many people will not have jobs. And this is something that I would invite you to look at as important for the turn of humanity. We no longer are going to be a race of survival and slavery. we need to come into our true creative potential, our gifts, in order to anchor the real wealth into this planet Earth, which is all of these regenerative systems that we have innately within us. And so the exchange model is going to change in the world, and that's something that we have to prepare for. We have to educate ourselves. We do need to learn how technology works because that's the future, but we need to do that in order to merge with it in a harmonic way. If we are in right order with nature, what I see is a powerful future that we use technology in order to aid healing. All that genetic data can be used for good, can be used for the destruction of the pharmaceutical industry as we know it, into technologies that can regenerate humanity out of illnesses. Illnesses, for the most part, are a man-made thing. Okay, so that's a really tough thing to see, but a lot of illnesses are man-made. So we need to remove away from those things. And then again, in our governments, that's also going to change into a more harmonic order. So we are going to go through a reset. We need to build resilience internal. We need to learn how to cultivate the 0 point. Do not get polarized by anything, which is happening right now, is to create polarization so people become confused. The most important thing is to not fall into that, because that will guide you in making wrong choices. And essentially, in the long term, people that will fall into the transhumanist agenda will be the ones that are mostly afraid and trying to survive, rather than the ones that trust in themselves and in that connection to the divine. So that's what I can share about that.
Very cool. And the last question I have for you, and I thank you for your time, is as you talk about going through this transformation and this wave and how we have all these different aspects coming at us, what is one or two things that we can watch out for to trigger in our minds to say, wait a minute, I'm falling into the fear pattern or I'm falling into the misinformation pattern? Let's take a moment, reassess, get out of this, and be able to ride the wave in a more harmonic and more serene kind of calmness.
Yeah, we need to rebuild trust in ourselves, in our intuition, and instead of depending externally because we're in survival for information. Right now, we have an overload of information, and we are biochemically addicted to social media, technology, and media of any kind. We need to kind of disconnect and come back inside. That's the number one thing. When we come back inside, you'll find that you have a lot of work to rebuild trust in yourself and your intuition. And that is the foundation. And secondly, once you're there, you're going to be uncovering all kinds of emotions that you've been suppressing for a long time. Do not ignore the emotions that you're trying to suppress. Don't suppress, don't ignore, don't run away from those difficult emotions, because that's actually how we are really manipulated. So the ability to kind of work with that information is the key to your freedom and your free will. Okay, so the 0 point, basically what that means, it's the observation in a state of non-judgment. It's a neutral state of observation. To cultivate that requires some practice. Meditation practices like Vipassana, energy techniques. I teach something called GPAC, grounding, protecting, aligning, co-creating. So really complex energy systems we can simplify in little tips and practices that you can do throughout your day to maintain in the present moment. Bring yourself back to the present. Every time you come back to the present, you will find security, safety, and peace. And that's the key. You have to just keep coming back to that over and over and over again.
And so, going along those lines, I've heard people, and I know I said that was the last question, but you just triggered something in my head
Yeah.
that I want to make sure I ask because I hear it a lot is people are saying when you make they're calling it the ascension to the fourth, fifth density or dimension body. And as we were talking about, that new DNA activates. Will that prevent us from falling into the traps of the fears and doubt of things? Or is that an illusion and we still need to be vigilant because we are still susceptible even though we're on another level?
So basically, what makes you susceptible to anything parasitic, even yourself as a parasite, is fear. Fear, mistrust. These are the foundations. Shame. Those are the foundations of parasitism. So if you are holding that in your body, because those are your core subconscious belief systems, that's what you're going to experience in your waking state and in your dream state. Our subconscious beliefs are so powerful. They dictate the direction of our life. They dictate the next moment, the people you meet, the places you go to. There is nothing random in your life experience. So the more we begin to take responsibility for what we are creating, this is how we navigate in a way that's more harmonious. You have to choose that. Now, what I see is that we're multidimensional. We are moving through many dimensions at once. We are all evolving. Evolution is not a choice. That's a natural order of existing on the planet Earth. So what we need to do is come into harmony with that evolution. Anytime you come out of harmony with yourself, your mind, your own emotions, your events that are happening outside of you, this is where you start falling in frequency, and this is where chaos starts to happen in your life, mentally, emotionally, and physically. So the invitation is come into harmony with yourself. Be congruent with your actions, with your thoughts, with your beliefs. If you're always congruent with that and you're congruent with your core values and morals, your ethical laws, if those ethical laws become more in harmony with natural order, universal laws of resonance, of co-creation, we literally can never experience anything out of harmony. And we not only enter into 5D, I believe, I see, and I know that we enter into many dimensions. And every night when we're sleeping, we access many dimensions simultaneously. So I think that what we need to cultivate is the resilience and a human vessel that has the capacity to sustain the ebb and flow of life, change in a way that is harmonious. And that's something that we have to build resilience towards. So, work on your fears, face your fears head on, alchemize that fear as you go, every moment of your day, and you will experience health, vitality, and especially access into the intuitive fields of information. The human has access to all information at any time, but you have to open yourself up in order to access that information, to be a channel for that information. Yeah.
Thank you. And I wish we had more time because I'm so enjoying this conversation. So we will definitely have to have you back on.
I would love to. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure and an honor to be here, Michael. Thank you so much for having me and for your amazing questions.
Thank you. And the honor was mine. And I thank you for accepting my invitation to come on because I know sometimes it's a little iffy of what you're going to get on shows. I've experienced it. So thank you for trusting me.
Thank you. You're amazing, and your level of understanding makes it so fun to be able to go into these deep, conversations. You can't go into these deep levels with everyone. So I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you. And I appreciate you as well. And thank you to everyone in the chat room. Thank you to everyone watching. And please remember to click like and subscribe if you don't already. And we will see you all on the next one. Have a wonderful night and subscribe because you never know. We may have her back on. And so you don't want to miss that. So thank you all. Good night.